This island is really beautiful. Look at these flowers and this huge valley. It's so vast. It looks like it never ends. A wonder of nature. But wait, what's that? It's gigantic. It looks anthropomorphic, and it's got a huge eye on its face and... Oh no, it's coming over here. Quick, run! It'll pulverize us. Run to the ship, run! Wow, thank goodness, we made it. Lucky for us. That thing is slow. We got away easily. But what was that thing anyways? What was it? That was a mythical creature, the Cyclops. The Cyclops were gigantic, one-eyed beings with enormous strength. Originally, there were three of them, Arges, Steropes, and Brontes, capable blacksmiths. These were the sons of Uranus and Gaia, and the brothers of the Hecatoncheires and the Titans. They were imprisoned by Cronus but released by his son Zeus, for whom they forged his famous thunderbolt as a sign of gratitude. However, at a later time, poets spoke of a different type of Cyclops, a race of dim-witted and violent one-eyed shepherds dwelling in the caves of the island of Sicily. The most famous among them was Polyphemus, the Cyclops who fell in love with Galatea and was eventually blinded by Odysseus. The word Cyclops can be literally translated as round-eyed. Based on most descriptions, the divine Cyclops were gigantic and immensely strong beings, with a single eye in the middle of their foreheads. They had a knack for metalwork and handicraft, and eventually ended up being the workmen of Hephaestus, whose workshop was supposed to be in the heart of the volcanic mountain Etna. Incited by his mother Gaia, the youngest of the Titans, Cronus, castrated and overthrew his father Uranus, establishing himself as the supreme ruler of all gods. Fearing the might of his brothers, he imprisoned both the Cyclops and the Hecatoncheires in Tartarus, setting the dragon Scampi to guard them for all eternity. Terrified of his children as well, Cronus tried devouring each of them as soon as they were born. In time, however, the Cyclops and the Hecatoncheires were released from Tartarus, but the only one of Cronus' children not to be eaten by him at birth, Zeus. Zeus did this at the advice of Gaia, who had informed him that he wouldn't be able to depose Cronus without their help. True to Gaia's words, the Cyclops played a crucial part during the Titanomachy. Namely, not only did they side with Zeus in his war against the Titans, but they also forged Zeus' mighty thunderbolt along with a trident for Poseidon and a helmet of invincibility for Hades. With the help of these weapons, Zeus and his party emerged triumphant from the Titanomachy, banishing the Titans to Tartarus once and for all. Now that Zeus had become the ruler of the world, the Cyclops would dedicate themselves fully to their talents and chosen line of work. They installed themselves in the forges of the divine artificer Hephaestus under the volcanic Mount Etna in Sicily, and under his direction they went on forging Zeus's thunderbolts, in addition to fashioning pieces of some of the other gods' equipment, like Athena's armor or Ares' chariot. The Cyclops were also believed to have built numerous monumental works all around Greece and Italy. Some of the most famous buildings attributed to them were the immense walls of Tiryns and the Lion Gate at Mycenae. It seems that all three of these original Cyclops met an untimely death at the hands of the Olympians. First, Arges was killed by Hermes while guarding low against the lust of Zeus. Then Apollo killed both Steropes and Brontes in an act of vengeance for the death of his beloved son Asclepius. In truth, The Cyclops had nothing to do with his death, other than forging the thunderbolt which Zeus hurled in the direction of Asclepius. But obviously enough, Apollo couldn't exact his revenge on Zeus himself, so Steropes and Brontes had to suffer his wrath in Zeus' stead. Homer's Cyclops, on the other hand, were a race of unintelligent and ferocious shepherds living on the island of Sicily. The most famous among them, Polyphemus, was the son of Poseidon and the nymph Theusa, and he had a famous encounter with Odysseus. Even though they also had only one eye and were as gigantic as Hesiod's Cyclops, Homer's Cyclops were neither blacksmiths nor obedient. Usually portrayed as violent cannibals, they led an unruly life, possessing neither social manners nor fear for the gods. They have no laws, nor assemblies of the people, writes Homer, but live in caves on the tops of high mountains. Each is lord and master in his family, and they take no account of their neighbors. The chief representative of Homer's Cyclops was the man-eating monster Polyphemus, described by Homer as having been blinded and outwitted by Odysseus. Later authors make him a would-be lover of the nymph Galatea. Long before being blinded by Odysseus, Polyphemus had fallen in love with her. However, as it may be supposed, his actions were neither graceful nor acceptable to the fair maiden, who rejected them in favor of a youth named Acis, the handsome son of Faunus, and the river nymph Semaethis. Polyphemus, enraged and with his usual barbarity, killed his rival by throwing upon him a gigantic rock. The blood of the murdered Acis, gushing out of the rock, formed a stream which bears his name to this very day. Upon landing on the island of the Cyclops, Odysseus and his sailors found themselves entrapped in the cave of Polyphemus. The Cyclops ate 6 of Odysseus' men, and Odysseus had no option but to devise a quick escape plan. So, one night he intoxicated Polyphemus and pierced his eye with a wooden stake. The next morning he told his men to hide under the bellies of Polyphemus' sheep, and thus he managed to smuggle them out of the cave. It was because of this act that Poseidon, Polyphemus' father, held a decade-long grudge against Odysseus, keeping him away from Ithaca and his beloved wife, Penelope.